So, welcome to LiberalViewer First Wednesday Live Q&A. This is the live question and answer show. I do answering viewer questions on the first Wednesday of every month at 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time. I like to answer viewer questions that are posted live in the comments during the broadcast. If you want to do that now, although I also enjoy answering questions that people post beforehand. It gives me a little time to do some research, which I have a few of those for today. But there was also some breaking legal news today that I want to cover before I get to the questions. The U.S. Supreme Court has handed down a 5-4 decision in the case of McCutcheon versus Federal Election Commission, FEC. And there's been a lot of worry about this after the Citizens United case, that this is another case that undermines regulation of campaign finance, stopping big money from getting too much influence in our politics. On that note, I noticed someone posted, Terry Alther posted a link to Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks on Facebook. He did a little video. I'm going to show you a quick 15-second clip of Cenk Uygur reacting to the Supreme Court decision, and what I think is overly emotional, as I'll discuss after I show it here.
Killed our democracy. It's an open auction now. We've got to end this. The Supreme Court's McCutcheon decision today was a crime against humanity. We've got to fight back. You got to get money out of politics. You have to amend the U.S. Constitution. They've killed our democracy. It's an open auction now. We've got to end this.
Sorry, I kind of looped it there, but yeah, you can see crime against humanity, end of democracy, and I think that is kind of a little bit of an overstatement. This decision was actually on a pretty narrow ground. Here, I'll show you. These are the limits that were up for the Supreme Court to decide. They struck down these aggregate limits in the bipartisan campaign reform Act. That's what a lot of people call McCain-Feingold, back from 2002, that permit an individual to contribute a total of $48,600 to federal candidates and a total of $74,600 to other political committees. So that's an aggregate limit, and it's called an aggregate limit because it's the amount total in the 2-year election cycle for congressional campaigns that you can contribute. But this doesn't actually cut down or get rid of the individual campaign limits. In fact, Roberts specifically said, let me make sure I get the right one here, that it's not about striking down individual limits. Here, let me put this up. Roberts, in his majority opinion, said, "This case does not involve any challenge to the base limits, which we have previously upheld as serving the permissible objective of combating corruption." And that's like, you can contribute a maximum of like $2,600 to a candidate, and to an individual candidate, and that is not under challenge, at least not in this case. I'll talk about whether Roberts may have set up a challenge in future cases in a minute. But this actually is just saying that there were limits that said, even though you can only give $2,600 to any individual candidate, you can also only give like $48,600 total in the 2 years. And that kind of doesn't make sense, because it's basically saying if you give $2,600 to 20 candidates, that doesn't cause corruption. But then when you give it to the 21st candidate, or whatever it is with the math, that's what causes corruption, because corruption is the only permissible, sufficiently strong government interest here to permit regulating speech. And of course, spending money on political candidates you support is a form of speech, according to the Supreme Court. That's what people often say is the money equals speech argument. And I don't know, money equals speech is kind of simplistic, but spending money to support political causes you believe in is protected First Amendment activity, I believe. And actually, if you look down in the video description, you can see I put a link to several videos I've made on this subject in the past, including one called Money Equals Speech, where I directly address that. So anyway, this is just cutting down these aggregate limits, and it's actually a pretty well targeted case for people who are trying to attack campaign finance regulation, because it takes one of the hardest to logically support rules, and so it's the most vulnerable to attack, and it did get it's a 5-4 decision, because it doesn't really make sense if all you're interested in is what's called quid pro quo corruption, where like I'm paying you to get you to do some act for me, and that's the corruption that campaign, and also the appearance of that corruption, that's what campaign finance regulation is supposed to prevent. If that's all you believe that the First Amendment allows you to prevent, then stopping these aggregate limits where you're not giving to a particular candidate, that doesn't really make much sense if that's your rationale. And here's what Chief Justice Roberts said in his opinion on that. This is like 2 paragraphs where he makes a distinction between when you give money directly to a candidate, that candidate is going to feel obligated. But if you give money just to a lot of candidates and the party in general, they'll feel grateful, but not necessarily obligated. Yeah, I mean, you can see that here, right? It says there is a clear and administrable line between money beyond the base limits funneled in an identifiable way to a candidate for which the candidate feels obligated, and money within the base limits given widely to a candidate's party for which the candidate, like all other members of the party, will feel or feels grateful. And the other thing that it says in this decision is that just because people who give large amounts of money to the party get more access, that's also not quid pro quo corruption. Here, I think here's the quote I want to show from the case, right? Spending large sums of money in connection with elections, but not in connection with an effort to control the exercise of an office holder's official duties, does not give rise to such quid pro quo corruption, nor does the possibility that an individual who spends large sums may garner influence over or access to elected officials or political parties. So having access and influence is not the same thing as bribing someone in what they call quid pro quo corruption. And so that's how this was all decided in the Supreme Court today. There were actually 4 votes for Chief Justice Roberts' opinion. Then Clarence Thomas voted saying he would go beyond that and strike down all limits on campaign contributions. And then there were 4 votes. Stephen Breyer wrote the dissent, where he said that the conception of corruption in the majority opinion was too narrow, and that there's a more collective kind of corruption. And Lawrence Lessig has written some good stuff on this. And one other thing I want to point out before I move on, that even though Chief Justice Roberts said, as I said, I showed earlier, this case does not involve a challenge to the limits on individual contributions. There was a good article in Slate, and maybe even those limits on individual contributions to candidates. It's possible, but it's not in this case, and that's why I think Cenk Uygur and some other people who've said this is, Citizens United on steroids, or is like, what did he say, a crime against humanity? I think that may be going a little bit too far. I need to do a little quick Marco Rubio. So that's my little discussion of McCutcheon and the decision there. I'll see if anyone has any questions about that. But I also want to, before I get to the live questions that people are asking in the discussion section, I also want to cover a couple questions that people asked me before I started here. The first one, let me see if I get this. This is Terry Alther asked this a couple different ways over the course of the month since the last time I did this. It's basically, you can see it asked down at the bottom, and then it's an update up there. It's about this child, Justina Pelletier in Massachusetts, who's basically been taken away from her parents. And you can see that second one, and there's a petition to investigate the hospital and the Department of Family Service, or whatever they call it in Massachusetts, like the Child Welfare Agency for child abuse. Here, I'll put this is the petition up. Sorry there, it looks like I forgot to turn on the microphone for this. Let's see, I had the microphone on over for this one, sorry, but then when I switched over this one, you can see this is the petition that is up on the White House website. We petition Department of Justice for a criminal investigation of Boston children and Massachusetts Department of Children and Family, or whatever that is, for abusing Justina Pelletier. And the most dishonest part of this petition, I think, is where it says the reason that they should be investigated is because the child was taken from her parents, quote, because Boston Children's called them and disputed a diagnosis from another leading hospital, Tufts. And it's actually a little bit more than a diagnosis dispute. They never really say that what they're worried about is that instead of being sick, that this girl is the victim of what's called Munchausen's by proxy. And there's actually a good article in Slate magazine, again, mitochondrial disease or medical child abuse, you can see here, that sort of gives two sides to the issue, and it's really hard to tell. One point that article makes that shows why it's hard to come to any real conclusion is that the journalists who've been investigating this, they've really gotten just the parent side of the story because of privacy laws. The hospital and the government agency, they can't really give their side so much, but there are a lot of things that make it look like the parents could have been abusing the daughter, and the disease, the mitochondrial disease, is very difficult to diagnose, and so it's hard to really make a judgment on that case without being able to see what's in the private files that the hospital and the government agency can't really release, and the parents, if they are the abusers, are not really going to be telling to the journalists. So I'm not really sure what conclusion to draw in that case, but I'm sorry that I had the sound cut out there for a minute. Did people were people commenting that the sound went out? The sound goes away when you put the article. Okay, wait. Yeah, okay, yeah, voice failing. Okay, well, the sound should stay up because I thought I went through at the beginning and made sure the microphone was working for all of the articles here. I'm going to go on to the next question I got. This was someone who posted in the comment section of the video before I started. This is from Carl Friedrich. Alan, please snend for us. Well, that is like the easiest question I ever get because I've already complied, obliged. What Carl wanted me to do there, I said the word snend for what reason I don't really know, but I will now move on to another question I got in the comment section before we started. Or no, this is actually a Facebook question. Isaac J. Dorko asks, with regard to Russia and the Ukraine crisis, what do you think is the best course of action moving forward for the U.S.? Excuse me, I need to get a little drink of water. Well, if you've been watching my LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup, for several Sundays I've done a lot of clips on what's going on in Crimea and Ukraine and with Russia. And I don't know, I've given some opinion of that along the way, but in general, I was thinking about it after I got that question for the last few hours, like what is my position on it, and I think one of the few advantages that Russia has is that Vladimir Putin is going to be around probably for 10 to 20 years. I mean, not an advantage in terms of the Russian people, but in terms of the continuity of their foreign policy, so they can really play kind of a long game, but that also gives a corresponding advantage to the United States is that we change foreign policy teams every 4 or 8 years usually, or maybe a little longer if you have continuity. Like if Hillary Clinton takes over from Barack Obama, for example, there will probably be some continuity of policy. But I think for the beginning of the Obama administration, there was that reset, trying to get a better relationship with Russia, and there may have been some benefits to that in getting like the Iran nuclear negotiations going, and maybe even with the whole Syria chemical weapons deal that was worked out. But I think the benefits have kind of fallen off on that, and whatever incentives we gave to Russia, we now have to replace in at least our policy and hopefully European policy with like replace the economic carrot with the economic stick and try that for a few years, just because I think Vladimir Putin is more interested in trying to gain more domestic power by emphasizing his nationalism, and these types of, the whole Ukraine and Georgia and all that stuff does help him mask his inherent domestic weakness, I think. And the more we can play more of a long game and give him economic disincentives that undermine him domestically without giving him things that the United States and the West do that play into his whole paranoia about being surrounded by NATO. And anyway, I think that economic disincentives and sanctions for the rest of the Obama administration are probably our best course of action. And then when a new administration takes over, if it looks like it's going to be a more hardline, like Republican administration, that may be an incentive for Putin to try to do something right there at the end of the Obama administration, or I don't know. But I just think at least all we can do now is try to be a little bit tough on Russia economically to make up for the the warming of relations at the beginning of the Obama administration, and then see what happens in the long term. I don't know. Is that a good enough answer? Hopefully it is. I had one more question that was asked before I started. Hopefully this okay. Sound is still on. This is from Chufarid. Why did you book this at the same time as the Young Turks and not after? Well, I've been doing this live Q&A show on Wednesdays at 4:30 p.m. Pacific time, going all the way back. I checked. I started this at the end of February of 2013, and for a while I was doing it like every Wednesday. And then I started the Sunday show weekly and cut this back to just the first Wednesday of the month. But it's always been at 4:30 p.m. Pacific, always on Wednesday, and now on the first Wednesday. So I'm just sticking to the schedule I've always had. And let's see, it looks like I have been broadcasting for about 18 minutes, but I do want to go into the live comments and see if I can get just, I will take anything you got. Let's see. Friday the 13th said, also I would attempt to pass an amendment clarifying that money does not equal speech. Well, I mean, I have to disagree with like two parts of that comment. First, I am really skeptical of any constitutional amendment to change First Amendment protections. Every time I see any specific language, it seems to have all these unintended consequences that limits the speech of groups of people whose speech shouldn't be limited, or will give the government the power to regulate types of speech that I don't want to see regulated. Because corporations include non-profit corporations, include non-profit corporations like the ACLU or the Sierra Club, or also corporations run newspapers and media, other types of media. Google is a corporation, and do you really want the government saying what Google can allow on YouTube, or regulating? I mean, I think we have enough regulation on broadcast TV of that kind of speech, and so I think a constitutional amendment is going to have too many unintended consequences. And then the whole money equals speech thing, as like I said at the beginning of the broadcast, there are a lot of ways that people spend money that should be protected by the First Amendment. Like, it's too simplistic to say money equals speech, but it's not very difficult to defend the idea that spending money on political causes you believe in, or spending money to communicate ideas you believe in, that those are things that need to be protected by the First Amendment as important political activities. If you want to say that means money equals speech, that's a simplistic way, but political activity, spending money on in causes that you believe in, is something that should be protected by the First Amendment. Now, that doesn't mean that there's no possible regulation, but there has to be a strong government interest, like fighting corruption, and then you get into this fight between the 5 votes in the majority in McCutcheon and the 4 in the minority as to exactly what type of corruption should we be fighting. Are we just fighting quid pro quo corruption, where it's like a bribe, where I give you money and then you're going to do something specifically, a specific politician is going to do something for me specifically because I gave that one politician money? Or are we talking about spending that gives you, to these like PACs that then spend in favor of something, or to political parties that let you be like a big donor that goes to the big parties and that gets to go into the politician's office and help write legislation, and that's another kind of wider definition of corruption, and that I'm still thinking about exactly where to draw that line, but that wasn't really that big an issue, I don't think, in this particular case, because of the specific rule that was up for debate. It seemed like a rule that was very difficult to say that, giving $2,600 to 20 politicians is not corrupting, but when you give the $2,600 to the 21st politician, all of a sudden now you are corrupting. That seems like a very difficult argument to make. So I guess we're still on McCutcheon here, but let me scroll up and see. Pat's Rule 213 says, what does LiberalViewer do about the war on drugs? Does he keep it going, or does he legalize them or decriminalize them? Well, I mean, I've always believed that it shouldn't be up to the government as to what you do with your own body, to yourself. If you want to like inject yourself with battery acid, as long as you're of sound mind, the government doesn't really have shouldn't have the ability to stop you. And so I've always believed that all drugs should be legal, but should also be drug addiction should be treated as a health problem, and drug treatment should be available. And but to answer the question there from Pat's Rule 213, what to do about the war on drug, I would not just decriminalize, I would actually legalize all the drugs, I mean, at least in terms of a principle. Oh, NO8549 says, the docs aren't happy with the 17th doc fix. I'm not either. Well, I saw that NO8549 had asked a question back on LiberalViewer Sunday about that, and it's kind of a complicated problem. I might be able to cover that in the future, but I don't feel like I know all of the ins and outs and details to really talk about, the changes in the coding there. Oh, and then NO8549 also says, well, I don't have thousands of dollars to throw around, so do I have equal access to legislators? Well, you don't. Obviously, you don't have equal access to legislators if you don't have as much money. But the thing is that the problem of rich people having more power in society than poor people is not something that can be fixed with campaign finance regulation. And what I've always believed is the best solution to the problem of money in politics is public financing, and it hasn't really been tried. It was sort of tried for presidential candidates for a while until the limits got to be too low, and candidates were able to opt out and fund at a much higher level. But I think one thing that people don't understand about campaign finance is you don't have to spend the most, as long as you can spend a credible amount, and especially have access to broadcast time on TV networks, which is one of the most expensive things still, even with the internet in campaign finance. If you can have that, you don't have to be the one who spent the most money. You can still win as long as you have a certain floor. You don't have to match the big spenders dollar for dollar as long as you have a credible amount of money to spend. Let me see. See, I've got about 25 minutes, and I'm kind of running out of energy here a little bit, but I'm going to take one or two more comments before I finish up. Oh yeah, I see. I'm getting the feedback here about how I didn't have the microphone on there for a little while. Let's see, DRRCK11 on the whole Justina Peltier case says, "Oh, you have to understand that Child Protective Services operate in what's in the best interest of the child, not the parent. Tough case to judge." Well, yeah, it is a tough case to judge, especially when you don't really have all the facts that are in private files, and you just have basically the parent side, which can be compelling. And I'm not saying that there aren't overzealous hospitals, or certainly we have Child Protective Services here in what they call DCF in Massachusetts. There are a lot of cases of them being overzealous, although here in California we have cases of them also being underzealous, and where kids have died when they should have been checked or given more supervision and didn't get it. So it's hard to judge from a distance without being able to look in the private files. Let's see, some people, Mike Sully attacking Cenk Uygur, saying, calling him names. Let's see, I'm all the way up here. Take one more here. Christopher Curtis says, "We all know that all inventions are usually not kept by the inventor, hence the profits go to rich bottom feeders while inventors die of poverty, like in the case of the inventor of the shoe, not laces." I'm not sure what that really relates to anything. But I appreciate everyone who showed up for my live Q&A. I hope you enjoyed my answers to the questions, the live questions, the pre-posted questions, and my little 12-minute summary there at the beginning of the Supreme Court's decision in McCutcheon versus FEC. And like I said, there are some interesting links down in the video description. If you check those out, you can see the full opinion in McCutcheon. You can see a Slate article about how, even though Roberts didn't really go that far in his majority opinion, he set the stage for what could be some worse decisions in the future. I'll definitely agree with that. And then I also have a Slate article about that girl fighting, or the parents fighting to get their daughter back from the hospital. And I have a link to my own videos on campaign finance issues from the past. I'm also working on a video on the Hobby Lobby case, should be done in the next day or two, called Obamacare Forces Corporate Abortions. So look for that, and then I will be back on Sunday. Maybe an abbreviated version of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup, because I'm also on a panel at an ACLU conference this Sunday morning talking about immigration law here in California. So very, very busy. Hopefully I'll be able to fit it all in. And thanks for joining me. See you Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, and also just see you around the internet.